Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the POG Society podcast. This is episode number 2. I am your host, Scotty POG. On the last episode, we kind of just went through and introduced what the podcast was going to be and stuff like that. I know it's been a little over a week now since I posted that episode. I appreciate everyone who watched it or who listened to it on Spotify or wherever else you are listening to. I appreciate it. This week, I didn't know what to really talk about. Kind of going back and forth on a few topics, but one that I kind of landed on actually just a minute ago, and it sounded like an interesting topic, is the topic of what it was like to grow up without the internet. I was born in 1993, so obviously the internet wasn't really around in 1993. I think it might have been a thing for like business stuff like that. It wasn't really a thing you heard of or anything. I didn't get the internet until I was probably, I want to say, at least 8 or 9 years old. So most of my childhood, I didn't have tablets, I didn't have a cell phone to play on, I didn't have YouTube to watch when I was bored. Uh, the TV I watched, especially as a young kid, 3 or 4, on to like 5, was just local TV we got from an antenna that we had outside. I grew up on a farm with my grandparents, and we had a big antenna that was out in the yard. And that's how we got our channels. We didn't get very many channels. We got channel 2, like channel 3, like your local channels, Saturday morning cartoon, stuff like that. It's the kind of stuff I watched until we eventually got cable or satellite. I think it was satellite. Which I think the first one we ever, the only one really had when I was a kid around was DirecTV. In the area that I was in, we didn't have like Dish Network or anything like that yet at that time. I remember we got DirecTV, and that was a game changer for a lot of things, especially as a kid, because we had things like Disney Channel and Nickelodeon and MTV and stuff like that to kind of watch that wasn't your typical Saturday morning cartoons. That's why I introduced like SpongeBob, um, shows like Fairly Odd Parents down the line, Drake and Josh. All those shows that kind of shaped me as a young kid into an adult. But growing up without the internet was definitely a weird thing. Kind of looking back at it, because now I can't imagine life without the internet, which is something we use every day. I use it for my job. I use it for streaming. I use it for work. I use it for fun. I use it in my everyday life. I have a cell phone, you know, like we all do, and I'm on it all day, every day. It seems, it's literally attached to my hip sometimes. So growing up with the internet is a weird concept, and I don't think people understand or remember those times. Um, so as a kid growing up internet, without the internet, it was a thing where we would just go play outside. Like I said, I grew up on a farm. I was lucky enough on this farm. We had a lot of acreage. We had most of my family there, so my cousins were there, um, and that's who I hung out with. My school wasn't a very big school. My class was a class of 11 until 5th grade, and then we merged schools and became a class of like 40 something. Um, but it wasn't a very big school. We didn't have a lot of friends to hang out with, especially as a young kid before I even went to school. 4 or 5 years old. Uh, just playing outside. We had a little tree area where I lived. Um, that we used for forts, and we all had our own forts, and we would do our own thing. We had a hill that my grandpa had built with his tractor of dirt. That during the wintertime, that's where we sled, because we lived pretty much on flat ground. So he created the area that we can go sledding and stuff and keep ourselves entertained in the wintertime. Um, and it was just a big area uh, to grow up in. I wouldn't change my childhood for anything. I think I grew up in a fun time. I didn't eat dirt and stuff like that, but we grew up in a time where it was okay to drink the well water. And we did every day. Like if we're outside playing and having a good time, instead of going inside to get some drink, we would just turn on the well and drink the well water. Some of the best water to date. I don't want to know. I don't want to know what was in the well. Um, I've never asked. As far as I know, it was good water. It was clean water. It's the water that we got pumped into our houses anyway. That was pretty much our tap water. Um, that's how the farm worked that we were on. Uh, but yeah, we drank straight from the well. We drank straight from the hose, which is connected to the well most of the time. Um, And so it was a fun time to grow up in, and I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't change it for anything. It was back before, we had our lives controlled by technology. There was no worry of if we were going to get in trouble for something we posted online or anything like that. You know what I mean? Cyberbullying wasn't a thing growing up for me. Not young in my younger years, not like my middle school, high school years. It really was, and we'll get to that at some point. But growing up without the internet, it was a interesting time. Like I said, we made forts, we played outside, we rode our bikes. Um, like I said, we lived out in the country, so we didn't get to ride our bikes down the street, um, or anything like that. We rode our bikes on the country road, which for those who don't know, most country roads are 1 mile long. So one square of a country roads is 4 miles. And so we would, a lot of times as kids, me and my cousins, we would hop on our bikes and we would just ride around that square. That took a while, especially because I wasn't the most in shape kid. Still am not. Uh, but it was fun. You got to spend a day with your cousins and ride around this section of this farmland. Every house is like a mile apart, so you didn't really see anything. There wasn't a worry of being kidnapped back then. It was just a very much a different time, and I can't imagine growing up in today's world with today's rules of being online all the time, being on a tablet or a phone all the time and watching YouTube. I wouldn't want that for me. I know some people love it, and some people wish we would have had it. Like I said, I'm not wanting to take back how I grew up. I feel like it taught me how to socialize, which I think a lot of kids today are missing out on because they're socializing through the internet, but they're not socializing much in person. And then COVID and stuff come through and take away the ability to go to school in person for a while. I don't think that helped a lot either. Um, so I think, growing up with the internet taught me how to socialize better with people. I have a very bad anxiety problem and I don't like talking to new people. But when I do, I'm told that people don't notice that I have an anxiety problem because I hide it really well. It's a very silent anxiety problem. Um, so I feel like growing up without the internet and without the use of a tablet and stuff like that, I feel like that was the reason why I socialize so well. Um, in other people's eyes, I think I fail a lot. I think I suck at doing any kind of socializing, but I have been told otherwise by people who have observed me and my friends, stuff like that, growing up. So that could also be a lot due to my grandpa. Like I said, I was raised by my grandparents, which also brought a different light into things for me as well, because I didn't have the typical um, family life of being able to go camping or do stuff like that. My grandparents, by the time I came along, like I said, I was born in 1993, and they raised me since I was 6 days old. But by the time I came along, they had already raised six of their children. So I was what I call the last of seven. And they were my great grandparents. So they're, by the time I come along, they're in their, 50s, um, 50s, 60s, so somewhere around there. My grandma died when I was 12 and she was 68. And my grandpa died when I was, I believe I was 24, 25, 20. So I was 20 something. And I think I was 24 in 2018. I had to do that math. That doesn't sound right, but it could be. I don't know. Uh, it's been a blur since 2018 for me since he passed away. But he was 82, so he was around for a while. But I wouldn't have traded growing up the way I did for anything. Especially with my grandparents. I feel like I have what I consider an older soul. I'm very old school in things, and I think it's because I was raised by them, by my grandparents is the reason for that. I feel like I have a lot of values they instilled in me from them growing up and hearing their stories and their struggles. Because they both grew up in like the 30s and 40s, 50s, and saw a lot of things we're never going to see. Their perspective on life was different than an average parent for me. And I think that helped teach me the values of just being happy. And I was a very happy kid growing up. I had no complaints. I was very loved. That's one thing everyone made sure I knew, is I was very loved. I didn't even really realize I was, I guess, adopted by them until I was, 6 or 7. I didn't realize that they weren't my biological parents. My grandma to me was and always will be mom. My grandpa to me, when I was younger, I called him Papa. As I got older, it's just Pops. And he was my best friend as I got older. And like I said, I wouldn't change that relationship for anything. We went through a lot, especially because after my grandma passed away, he was the one who had to raise me. And again, I was 12 years old. I wasn't an adult. I wasn't able to raise myself yet. And by the time I turned 14 is when he got his license taken away because he was legally blind, and could no longer see correctly. And so by the time I was 14, I got a learner's permit, and I was the one doing the driving. So I've been driving since I was 14. I got my license when I was 16. I really wish I wouldn't have gotten my license when I was 16. That's just because I rode my bike everywhere at the time, and I quit riding my bike when I got a car, and I wish I would have kept riding my bike more. You live and learn, I guess, but I wish I would have rode my bike more often than I did after I got my car, and I got my license. But yeah, I got my license at 16, like everybody else. But I had learned to drive very young, at like 14 years old. I was driving on trips to the store, which is 20 miles away, to the nearest Walmart that we went to. Family, we had 6, 7 hours away. I would be the one to drive. At 14 years old, and then again, I had a learner's permit, and and he had a license that they gave him just so I could drive. And a lot of people don't realize that. At at the DMV and the eye doctor, we were very close, and they gave him his license, told him not to drive. He's not allowed to drive, but they gave him a license so I could drive with him, and so I could be the one there to drive with him, and drive him around when he needed, because we had no one else really that was there when we were needing to go places, like the doctor's offices and the stores and stuff like that. And then by the time I turned 16, I was able to drive by myself. Um, I'm the one, again, I was a primary driver in his life up until he died. Uh, I drove him a lot of places. But yeah, to kind of get back on topic here, is just the point I was trying to make with this is, I think growing up without the internet was a blessing. Um, by the time I got the internet, again, I think I was like 7 or 8. We had dial up. It was a company called Internet Nebraska that we had, uh, and it was typical dial up. And I didn't really know, like by the time we got it, like, it wasn't required for school or anything. We just got it because I had wanted it, because I had some friends who had it. And we were talking like Yahoo Messenger and stuff like that, back when Yahoo Messenger used to have like chat rooms. Uh, Back before, this is before MySpace was even a thing, I believe. I think that was, but when I was in middle school, I got into MySpace. Uh, and again, I don't want to be someone who grew up in an era of technology, just because I feel like I got the experience of being able to play outside and play with my friends, and not have and not be a screen apart. To to be face to face and be able to interact and in person. I feel like we're missing that a lot these days, especially me myself. I moved away from Nebraska to Texas. I don't get to see my childhood friends or my family every day, so we're trapped on a screen. It's very very difficult, because we went through some tough times, especially in my family, where it would have been nice to be there face to face and not have a screen in between us. But it's just the way it is, and I'm very happy that we have these technologies to be able to talk to each other without being next to each other. I think that's a great thing. I'm not discounting that at all. I just don't envy people who grow up with it, who don't know different. Um, and if you're someone who was raised with a tablet primarily, or um, have have no experience of not having technology, because believe it or not, people out there who are adults who grew up with only like only knowing technology. Um, and it's the same as every other generation. When my grandparents grew up, they didn't really have TV. And when their kids are growing up, they had TV. And when I grew up, I had better TV, and then we eventually got the internet and stuff like that. So I grew up in that sweet spot, I call it, of I grew up primarily without technology being involved, and then I kind of got ushered into the technology era of things. Whereas kids, I feel like born in like the early 2000s and onward, were thrust into a world of technology that they didn't get a choice. And nowadays, I think we depend too much on technology to keep our children happy, rather than having them go on play dates, or go hang out with friends or whatever have you. Um, it's one of those things where I wish we were more dependent on face to face interactions, and then not worrying about the online stuff. Again, growing up in middle school and high school when the internet was still relatively an unknown thing, we had cyberbullying and stuff like that, which wasn't a fun time. I have a lot of stories I could tell on that. Uh, but like I said, the whole point I wanted to make is I'm glad that we have technology. I'm glad for what it can do. Um, but I wish we still had that face to face interaction mindset. I wish it was. I wish we could just get back to where everybody could talk and not have a screen in between us. Um, but that's kind of everything I had to say. It was on my mind. Figured I would talk about it. It's kind of direction I'm going to take this podcast thing. Just kind of whatever on my mind. When I decide to sit down and record it, I know there's a lot of topics I want to hit just from my life and my personal experiences. So that'll probably be the next couple episodes or so. But if you did listen to this, or watch this over on YouTube, or listen on Spotify, or wherever you're listening or seeing this, I do appreciate it. I am posting this on the POG Society YouTube channel, and then about a few days afterwards, I'm going to post it on my personal YouTube channel as well. So if you see it in two places, no, they're both me. Um, I'm just putting one first and then second, but they'll both be on, but they'll always be on Spotify the same day they're uploaded to YouTube. Maybe a little bit different there because it takes a little bit longer to upload on Spotify. It does on YouTube, but it might be on Spotify first if I do it fast enough. But yeah, find me on Spotify, the POG Society Podcast. Find us on YouTube, either on this channel, the POG Society YouTube, or my YouTube channel, which is a Scotty Pog. If you ever want to see me live, I do stream on Twitch occasionally, twitch.tv/ScottyPog. And then I will see you guys in the next episode. I appreciate if you watch. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. We appreciate it. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.